All right. I think let's start with kind of chatting through what we want to do and make sure we're all on the same page. Um, so we chose this tweet. I was realizing, looking at some of the replies and other stuff, and y'all can give me your opinion too. This tweet seems to be making three distinct points, and I would like to focus. I think we would really only have time to focus on one of them. Does that seem reasonable?
Why do you say that?
Because we want to get it done in 30 minutes, and last time it took an hour.
Well, it depends
Which
on,
part?
I guess,
the timing or the fact that it's.
Well, I don't know why you think that one individual is interesting enough as opposed to treating the tweet as a whole.
Well, and then when you say whole tweet, do you mean the whole tweet, the whole thread?
Oh, you meant the thread. Yeah.
Well, no, I still just mean the tweet. So, like this one, she's basically talking about the Democratic Party, and this one she's talking about the Republican Party. I think those are two separate, deep discussions. And both of those could be an hour in themselves. Or you could just do this one, which is really kind of what everything is. But then I wouldn't bother going into the whole whether the Democrats want to succeed or not. I would just stay on the fact that it's
I mean, what seems strange to me is if our goal is to kind of analyze a tweet and its effectiveness and the argument it's making, it seems weird to only analyze part of that tweet.
No, so the goal is to analyze a phrase, not a tweet. They just happen to be tweets. So we need to find the right size utterance, right? It could be a speech, it could be a word, it could be a sentence. A tweet is just an arbitrary, like, let's not even look at anything as bigger than a tweet, but it's not a tweet necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, contextually,
yeah, I don't agree with that, but okay, go ahead.
I mean,
yeah,
it's a breadcrumb trail. We're just gonna follow it where it goes, and it's never gonna be nice and neat because that's just not how argument analysis works. It always goes into things like, it always goes into wherever it wants to go. Really, as long as it's giving a valuable perspective, I think it's not a waste of time to go where it goes because it's hard to say what an argument is. It's hard to say where those limits are.
Well, but okay. Well, we have the concept of an atomic claim. I would still like to keep the phrases down to an atomic claim, and she's making two different claims in this. And Tim, I think you agree that these are two different atomic claims, right?
Right. She's making multiple atomic claims. And I kind of broke it down in debate map, but I also broke it down incorrectly, which I think is interesting, because I read it wrong, right? And that's part of, I thought, the kind of thing we're analyzing is, was it an effective tweet or not? Yeah.
So, and to Steve, to your point, I mean, go where it goes. That's fine.
Yeah.
The difference is that if I start talking about the Republicans and then Adriel starts talking about the Democrats, I got feedback from people watching the last video that they were a little confused because it seems like we were talking about two different things. Even though it's the same tweet, it's still like, it's not even two interpretations of the same thing. We're covering two different topics within the same piece of content, which I know there's some flexibility there, but I want to start as narrow as possible to reduce that, because I just think it's impossible for us to talk about both, whether the Republican Party as a whole wanted it to succeed and then also whether the Democratic Party itself wanted.
Well, luckily she is also in the same boat. Like, is that what she's saying? How interesting that we read that out of that, is she talking about, where did she say Republican and Democrat?
Well, which is exactly why I think we have to take a tweet as a whole as opposed to.
Interesting. Like, it's funny, like, what she's doing is just really very clever. She's a very clever person. I really like her writing. I like her stuff. She wrote a pretty good book a few years ago. I think it was called Notes from Flyover Country or something. About American political excess. Which I thought was good. But yeah, this is very strategically done. That's why I like it so much.
I propose we talk about the whole tweet. We can box it into looking one, and I don't mean the whole thread. I mean the whole tweet. And we could box it by, let's talk about the first phrase, let's talk about the second and third. But there are reactions that involve the whole set, just like Steve was saying now. I find it too limiting to just pick one phrase and go after that.
We can also just see where it goes. I mean, the way that this, happens a lot of times is you look and you're like, okay, here's the argument, and you start to work on it. And you find it goes into a different place, and then you haven't lost anything, because then you can abandon that line and pick up the new one. And that's always very interesting, I think.
Well, if we're not going to set scope, we need to set time. So are we committing to a 30-minute podcast or not?
I mean, I think we can get to a good, valuable place in 30 minutes. We won't be able to solve something in 30 minutes,
No,
but we'll have it more solved.
It'll be solve it in 8 hours.
Right. Or probably, like most arguments, never, right? Arguments are endless. A lot of them are endless. Just go to any library. You'll see the books over the centuries about the same question, arguing with people long dead. Like, even dying doesn't get you out of argument. People are still coming for you. Like, that's a powerful thing if death can't stop it. Jeez.
So I'll take that as a vote for time boxing. I would propose time boxing it at 45 minutes, because if we're trying to do a video or a podcast that's half an hour, you're going to have moments that would be good to edit out anyway. You always get more tape than the final product. So
yeah,
and I wouldn't mind it going to 45 minutes of actual tape and then editing it down. And they don't have to like cut off right at 30 minutes, but I guess so like after 30 minutes of discussion, then we start the wrap up section, which is to give your promote your things, and then and then close off the meeting. And so it'll be 35, 40, and then we could edit it down. If someone, I'm gonna probably edit one of them together, do a high edit pass, and then you can see whether we want to spend time doing that in the future. Okay, so, and then we have several new responses. I wonder if, so the format, and maybe it'd be good to bring up the format again. I guess that's a funny one. I'm trying to think. So I as the host don't introduce the replies. I call out each person, and y'all can bring up whichever reply you want to. Right? Let's see. I'm just trying to think if I have to know them up front. I mean, it's easier if I could bring them up on the screen. Or y'all can try and bring them up on your screens. Do you have a preference?
Whatever's easier is my preference.
If you're going to be if you want to highlight words and stuff like that, it'd be better to bring it up in your screen if you just want it to be visible. And one of the feedbacks that I got is, especially using Zoom, people like seeing the faces, and I kind of left the quote up the whole time. So, and the faces in Zoom are very small. Now, what I really would like to do is either, this one towards, I mean, I could put it over on half the screen, but either where I'm showing half, or I was going to try and log in with another device because Zoom doesn't let you run two cameras on the same thing. And then it would be us four, and then there'd be a fifth thing that has the text, because a lot of this text is pretty short. So I think that would be, an interesting way I think that'd be an easier way to handle it.
If need be, we can also use StreamYard, because that has a bit more clear of, like, it's always got a panel of the people on the left, and then it's got the shared content in the right, a bit more sort of prominent than the weird Zoom recordings sometimes do.
Yeah, the faces in StreamYard are bigger, I think. Although or did they even have an option to where the faces and the content are all the same size? I can't remember if there were several screen setups in StreamYard.
I don't think so, but I'm not sure how useful that would be. Like, if we're looking at text, I would always want, personally, I'd want the text to like take up most of the screen and then just have the faces like somewhere permanently.
Yeah, unless it's really, really short text. And the text, I mean, so it'd be nice to show that full screen and then go down to a fifth of the screen rather than leaving it full screen the whole time. Not that it matters that much. But so when doing this, though, I'd bring it up, and then what I think I'll do is I'll just bring it up to read it, and then I think I'll just not have it up after that. So, but if y'all want to like point something out or something, then y'all can always share your screen. And I guess for now, since I don't have an easy way to pull up these, I mean, I could scroll through the document. That just doesn't look very nice. I don't know. We could do that. So
yeah, we should have a separate meeting where we should try out a couple of the different technologies.
Yeah.
And not have to, not do it not try it out in the middle of our analysis.
yeah. So which way do we want to go right now?
I think you're. It's more sure that you do the presenting of the content because you're more familiar with Zoom right now, and I don't know the tools. And if we switch back and forth, I'm not sure what happens.
It seemed to work okay the last time we did it. If I remember, it was okay. I really like this thing that Bentley has that just looks so cool. That thing.
Yeah.
This is amazing. It's so cool.
Thanks. So for these tweets, does everyone know which one they want to? Because I think some of these are just suggestions. I don't know if anyone actually.
I posted all the other ones. So and each one was sort of a little topic that we might want to discuss. I don't know if you want me to say the topics ahead of time. One of them is just the full thread, and since we don't want to do the full thread from her, we can skip that one.
Yeah, if it comes up in conversation, we can show those. Like if someone says, "Oh," and her, she said that somewhere, I can pull it up. You know what we need to do we shouldn't always do this through Twitter, but we should really add these tweets to a tweet stream. What's it called? I don't know. I don't think I have time to do it right now. Oh, why is this going to Dropbox? Did you use images?
That must have been. No, I every time I copied the direct tweet and attached it to the image, and I think maybe one time the Dropbox link was in my clipboard rather than the Twitter link. So I'll have to fix that one.
I mean, as far as responses go, I don't really have I can do any of them, but I'll do this first one if nobody wants to do it.
This one, the Carl Glassman.
The one
or
that's like right after the on the suggested responses document. It's like the very first one that is clipped there. Unless somebody else wants to do that one.
That was the one Bentley got.
Yeah, like it's just the very first one under suggested responses. Like I can do this one.
that one right there, the Simulux.
And it speaks to some of my interests about making choices and how to engage and things like that, which I might talk about a little bit. So.
I can find that one and get it prepped.
I found it.
No, I can't.
Oh,
Well,
wait.
actually,
I
I
can do
should
that
have
one,
linked to it properly. Let's see if I did. Oh, yes, I did. All right, so so the order, I guess I would go me and then Tim and then Adriel and then Steve. Or no,
Sure.
let's see.
One thing I did in there is I tried to break down her argument using the what is it,
Yeah,
the Tolman model. What is the model that is it Tolman, the standard?
Yeah, the Toolman is that basic T, the
Toolman.
data warrant claim, the Toolman theory that everybody uses.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Let me do something here with that, because it keeps popping up debate map with the COVID convo layout.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an overlay, and for one thing, I don't think Jamie would want us to use that because that's from the Society Library.
It is pretty interesting looking, though. I mean, argument
Yeah,
mapping is always interesting. It's like, to me, I don't really do a lot with it, but it's always fun to look at, I think.
So
I may have to share that may be one where I have to do the sharing.
Yeah.
probably best
Then I
anyways,
can
because
get-
you're going to be navigating a lot around it.
I mean, one thing I can
yeah.
do is I can make a Google slide with just the elements of the Toolman model, and then you can just blank those out and make it your own slide anytime you need. That would be easy to do. I might even already have that in some lecture slide somewhere in the vast wasteland of Google Drive teaching folder.
That would help.
Yeah, I can do that. I might even have that right now.
I really want to make like a custom made web interface to build that kind of thing. Let me share my screen real quick. Hold on, just so you see.
I made you co-host, so you should be able to just, let's see if you can share without having to do anything, getting permission or anything.
There it is. I should probably.
Oh, and by the way, real quick, on my screen, is the text the right way around or backwards? It's the right way around, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So make sure.
Maximize this. Are you still seeing it? You're seeing it, yeah.
Yep.
God, that background is amazing.
Distracting,
yeah,
but amazing.
It lets you choose different backgrounds too. You can have stars and you can have other things.
And
it's funny how a desert becomes distracting. And it's like many people are like, oh, anything to see a tree. God, I'm trapped here.
No, I'm just saying
I got a tree for you.
Pattern.
No, it's just like
it's just the visually.
Yeah, it's just the context of something, changes the meaning 1,000%.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll stop sharing. But maybe what I would do is try to break down what I understood her as saying in that first tweet. And I don't know if that's too early, me being the second person, or if that's a good way to go.
Well, so I would suggest doing that on the first pass. So the first pass is, what was your first impression of the tweet? Right. So go around to everyone. Right. And yeah, let's go Tim, Steve, Adriel. And then so do first impressions, then I'll start back over you at Tim and say, and where's my text? Because sorry, I should have had this up. been so long since I opened it. It's not my most recent usage.
Excuse me. Didn't mean to cough right in the microphone.
Always stay right in front of the mic. Okay, so
I'm in a very important meeting. What's up? Okay, I'm recording something right now.
so we go through first impressions. I'll introduce everybody and ask them for your first impression, and then analyze this argument for us is just what I'll say. And then yeah, I don't know, Tim, if you're going to go into debate map, maybe better to go
We can do it on a second pass. Like the point of my map was me trying to break down into you know, more planar logic what I thought the argument was she was making, and you know, the fact that I was wrong about it and I read it wrong is something that should be shown earlier rather than later, I think. Just because it's like, oh, this is what I understood her as saying, and you know, it wasn't until one of the screenshots that I posted later on, the main reason it's there is because it was only when I got down to that one in the thread that I realized my mistake, right? So I can give a first impression of like an emotional reaction to what she was saying.
Okay.
And we can go around like that, and then I can come back to, well, this is how I broke down her argument, and then you can talk about how I was wrong, something like that. That's one thread.
Okay, and then yeah, so just kind of review the format since we haven't done a lot of times. So I'll go through each person, ask them to do an analysis of the argument. You can refer back to someone else, and then I think just based on my understanding of time, we'll go into responses. But if you're like one of the first people commenting, someone else is saying something, feel free to like interrupt or ask questions, because I won't come back to you on the main argument. So you won't have a rejoinder time unless you butt in. And then when that seems to like die down or we start running out of time, at some point I'll have to figure out like, okay, at the 20-minute mark, I'm going to break in and we're going to go to analyze responses. But the responses in my mind are less, I mean, I don't know. Y'all have to let me know what you think, because there's almost even more of a deeper discussion on how to have a proper response to it rather than how to make the initial statement. So maybe responses should be 50% of the time. And then we want a little time, and we can decide whether we want to cut the section out completely, because oftentimes when we're analyzing it, we say what our favorite would be. So y'all can tell me if we want to eventually cut that out. And then I don't know if we'll have time for funniest response. But, awesome. Let me take a quick bio break and then let's see how far we get. Is that good?
Sounds good.
All right, I'll be right back.
And do you guys ever play around on academia.edu? There are some characters. There are some characters on that site. Great conversations. We're being recorded, so I won't say much.
I was going to ask more.
We'll talk later. So it's like a kind of a social media site for academics. I put all my papers up there and stuff.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people, the definition of academics is very broad. And so there's a lot of people in there, and they always have the most interesting kinds of responses.
I have on the thing we're talking about right here, I actually did a lot of background research. I guess I was the one this time that did some background research, because I wasn't aware of this podcaster, this reporter or journalist, or whatever she is, author. And there's some interesting background that informs some of what is being said here. I don't know if any of you follow her podcast, but that in itself is an interesting thing. I wish we could talk about it if we had more time. It seems to me we're going to be too fast to get into any of that.
Yeah, I mean, you could always just mention anything when you're analyzing the tweet based on the context of our podcast, but yeah, we wouldn't really get into. I mean, we'll see.
We'll see.
I don't know that I have all the. My concern is when we get into this, and maybe we can edit that conversation out if we have trouble. But the time of me pulling up the right, unless y'all end up pulling up any things you want to go through, the responses, me showing those will be slow. Just because I'm not prepped. I need. Okay, main one's on the screen.
I'm probably going to be interrupted by the return of my dog in about half an hour or so. So I'm going to have to kind of be careful with my mic here.
Yeah, appreciate that. Okay. I need like 5 screens to do this. So also in the future, I'm probably going to ask someone else to volunteer to do the screen sharing. So I can focus, or someone, separate the role of the person doing the announcing and the person doing the screen sharing a little bit, just because keeping track of what to pull up next is a pain.
Yeah, we just need a major monitor manufacturer to sponsor us.
Right.
And do 5 monitors. That's all we need.
And
Easy.
then we'll show the setup at the beginning of the
yep.
As their promo, or the back of
You
with
like
all the monitors.
Do you like to monitor arguments? MSI has the monitor for you.
That's right. Okay. All right. Well, now I've got stage fright. All right. Then I'm gonna go ahead and just call it winning arguments for now. We can change it to argument autopsy. All right. I guess I'm gonna start. Welcome to Winning Arguments, where you learn to win arguments as a panel analyzes highlights in detail and suggests winning arguments. Sometimes winning is changing your own mind. Please like, subscribe, share, and let us know what arguments you'd like to win. Okay. Gonna definitely have to edit some bits out. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I'm so slow. Let's see.
It's okay. I'm happy to do an opening with all my crazy access to copyright free song, all the crazy stuff for my own podcast. So
yeah, we'll think about that. Was the screen being shared through that whole time?
Yeah, I'm seeing the tweet here on your cool.
Okay, so we need to definitely not have the screen shared. All right, at the edit point, let's start over. Okay. Welcome to Winning Arguments, where you learn to win arguments as a panel analyzes highlights in detail and suggests winning arguments. Sometimes winning is changing your own mind. Please like, subscribe, and share, and let us know what arguments you'd like to win. Today's argument, let's do this. Okay. Today's argument is from Sarah Kenzior. A failed coup is a dress rehearsal. A political party that stages a coup and blocks investigation ultimately wants that coup to succeed. A political party that did not stage a coup, but does not assertively, quickly investigate and prosecute it, also wants that coup to succeed. Tim High, co-founder of Canonical Debate Lab. What was your first impression of this argument?
Well, I found it to be, first of all, a little presumptive. She starts off with a big leap of logic there, and a question that is, I guess, far from resolved. So I think she's talking about something obviously very important, but her very first assertion, her claim that the January 6th event was a staged coup, is such a big first leap that I kind of feel like she already lost half of her audience at that point. After that, she makes some interesting claims that we can go into, but that was my first gut reaction, is she's being sensationalist here, and she's preaching to the choir, because I don't see her trying to win over people with even the slightest difference of opinion than her.
Dr. Steve Giano, Associate Professor of Rhetoric at St. John's University, New York. What was your first impression?
My first impression will be to call everybody's attention to how this is structured visually, which is a beautiful way to argue, because you can't respond to the way something looks. It's difficult to do that propositionally. So take a look at this. This has the structure of a classical logical syllogism, but it has none of the elements a syllogism would need to draw a conclusion. In fact, the only common thing between these three things is coup. So I think it's very clever on her part to structure it in terms of a classical syllogism, because, I mean, she might not even be doing that on purpose, but that 3-step thing comes to us from the classical world, that this, and it's beautiful because, just like Tim said, there's a lot of presumptive statements here. If you put it in this structure, these look like proven truths. It's a wonderful way to dodge begged questions, is putting it in a structure like this, because it makes it look like these things are truth claims that have already been proved. It's kind of beautiful in an eerie way.
Adriel Briscoe, founder of Conferati. What do you think?
Yeah, this one's an interesting one. I think in the pre-show we had shown that I'm not sure if it was a bunch of like tweets in a series where this is, one of 18 tweets where she was just going off and typing a small novel, and we're just seeing one of those tweets, or if these are like in response to the other ones. I mean, either way, a lot of it I think comes down to choosing to call it a coup and not focus on just okay, well, was it a coup? Because the left definitely sees it that way. The right does not. The right sees it as trying to, implement what was, I guess, unjustly lost, or however you want to phrase that. And so if you haven't properly established it's a coup, the whole thing seems sort of moot to the whole conversation until you've, proven that.
And I'm Bentley Davis, creator of Goalibot. I agree with most of what you said. I think it was done powerfully. I think is a good for the people that would understand it and already kind of have an agreement. She's also, in my mind, is poking a bit at her own party, and she got flack from both sides, as we'll see. So I think it was kind of well phrased in general, except for the concerns that Adriel had that if you already kind of disagree that there was a coup, you're just going to pass this. So she's missing a whole half, which may not have been our audience, but we hope that everyone would be able to benefit from the conversation and not just isolate. And so in that way, this is actually slightly divisive, because already you're dividing, you're pushing people to their corners instead of coming together. All right, so Tim, would you analyze this argument for us?
Sure. First of all, another reaction I get after kind of hearing us rephrase this is, it's kind of like she started off the syllogism by saying the earth is flat. And if the earth is flat, at least half the people reading this, and I would say more than half, because I would place myself on the left, and I do not agree with her very first premise. That being said, I tried to break down what she was saying into a structured argument, something like an argument map, according to more or less the Toulmin model, or what we are trying to do with the canonical debate. Just, try to put it in more plain English, the argument she's trying to make here. I didn't exactly put it as a syllogism, but I did structured into, what we would call an argument with multiple premises. So let me pull up real quick the map I did. Here. It is not. There we go. Are you seeing this?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I just threw it out here. What is she trying to say? And it would be interesting if we had time for each of us to kind of take a stab at what's going on here. But I read it as she was like a syllogism, kind of leading up to one argument, one claim here, which is that the Republicans want a coup on the Biden administration to succeed. She sees this as being a coup. She saw the first attempt, January 6th, as being a first attempt. She called it a dress rehearsal. And the rest is pointing out how she wants it, evidence that they want further attempts to succeed. So this breaks down essentially into restating it. The argument would be the fact that Republicans block an investigation into the January 6th invasion of the Capitol building proves they want a coup to succeed against the Biden administration. And that is, that requires multiple kind of hidden premises as well in there, right? So the first thing is that Republicans blocked an investigation to the January 6th invasion. Is the first piece that would have to be true for what she's trying to say, which there's definitely evidence for. The next is that the January 6th invasion of the Capitol building was a failed coup, and that's the one we noticed right off the bat as being complicated. Then she makes a leap in her language that essentially says basically any failed coup is going to be followed by more attempts unless you actively prevent them. It's kind of like if you don't set an example, they'll just try again. Once that's been said, then basically what she's saying is there's no other reason for Republicans to have blocked the invasion unless they wanted the coup to succeed, right? So it was a coup. There's going to be more coup attempts. The Republicans didn't do anything about it. Therefore, they definitely want the coup to succeed, and that's the reason that they blocked investigation. And I've broken this down. I pulled out her language in here a little bit. But that's essentially how I saw her argument. It took me a while to realize that wasn't exactly what she's saying. But I don't know if any of you have any feedback on the layout here, how you would phrase this argument, if you think there are other missing premises or anything like that before we go into how I was wrong.
I think she's making multiple arguments, but I'm curious because and so someone else can talk first, but what you thought was kind of wrong about that, because that does seem to cover in my mind her main point.
Well, where I'm wrong is in how I interpreted her final phrase. Her final phrase was that, because she says a coup is a dress rehearsal, a failed coup is a dress rehearsal, right? And then she says a political party that stages a coup and blocks investigation ultimately wants that coup to succeed. So there she doesn't refer to the Republican Party by name, by the way, which is an interesting other point we could talk about. But she says that anyone who stages a coup and then blocks the investigation, they are trying to make the coup happen, right? But then she says a political party that did not stage a coup but does not investigate and prosecute also wants a coup to succeed. I took that as meaning it doesn't matter whether Republicans stage the coup or not. The fact that they are blocking the investigation means they want a coup to succeed. And that's where it took me a while to realize I was wrong. In fact, it seems that the second statement about a party that did not stage a coup, she's referring to the Democrats, right?
Yeah, that's what I got. Yeah.
I only got that after reading many threads. And there's I don't know if you want to show this thread. It's at the bottom where they're talking about the Biden administration. There's one of the responses that really kind of surprised me, and that's when it kind of made the click that the final phrase is about the Democratic Party.
Yeah, what's clever about her phrasing here is how she doesn't say Republican, Democrat, any of that. She says a political party. So this encourages the audience to become co-conspirators in the conclusion she wants. It's almost like being swept up in a river. And this is a beautiful way to argue because you don't really have a defense from trying to solve a puzzle. So you immediately start filling in those claims, then it becomes your argument. It's really kind of a beautiful way to argue.
I actually was coincidentally just thinking about that sort of way of forming an argument before we started analyzing this, which is, when you're talking about a specific person, like if you're talking about corruption, for example, and you just start blaming somebody for being corrupt, you're immediately calling into tribalism and biases. And so one way to work around that is to start saying, do you agree that corrupting the law for any political gain is bad? The same thing could go with freedom of speech or something. You believe in the right to freedom of speech, right? That government should not censor. You're setting it up in a generic framing before you get to applying it to the specific case. Isn't that what's happening here? You've agreed with me, and now we have to apply it to the reality, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But also with the structure of what she did, making it look like a logical claim, like a syllogistic claim. These have the force of certain deductive truths that one would theorize from as if they're out of bounds of the argument. So by saying a political party, it makes it sound like she's citing political science here. I mean, she's not, but that's what it makes it sound like. So this gives the argument the force of truth and allows her to conveniently dodge a lot of propositional work that I think would do. But I mean, this is this is how Twitter works. I mean, it's kind of beautiful.
I think another reason for not calling out the parties specifically, and maybe this joins in with your point, Steve, is that it's kind of like setting up a generic rule that could apply in any situation, or exploring that in
That's
the
right.
public, right?
Yeah, right.
So in the future, whoever does this, I don't care. It's just like, if they're doing this, I'm saying a blanket rule. And that's interesting because that makes her seem less biased, or the statement seeming less partisan.
Yeah, that's right. It's also oh, sorry, Tim.
You're making the debate about principles, right? You're focusing on principles that everybody should agree to.
Which is something we want to encourage, right? And
yeah, I mean, I would say this is like the dodge of principles, because she's debating these are timeless truths carved in stone from politics, is kind of the feeling that you get, right? These are true things about coups and political parties that are not controversial. And she's just laying out those theories for us. And then we're supposed to fill in the blanks. We get swept up in the argument stream. And then it's our argument because we're filling in Democrat, Republican. We kind of become bought in. The principled argument, I have that for later in the show of kind of how I would rephrase it if I was doing it that way. But I won't get into that now. But I think it's like this kind of like just what Tim was saying, this beautiful thing. Like, what's harder to prove, a deductive argument or an inductive argument? An inductive argument, you need lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of evidence. A deductive argument, you just need one true statement by somebody who theoretically has done the research.
So, yeah, Steve, let's go ahead and go on to your analysis. What would you like to say about this?
Well, I mean, I've kind of said it already. I just think ideology is a wonderful thing. I mean, this is just a master at work here. What can we say about Kinzior? She knows what she's doing here. There's lots of things in here that aren't very good for if you wanted to change minds, but it's always a big assumption whether somebody is offering a statement in order to change somebody's mind in that 180-degree flip that we often imagine argument to be about. But argument can also just be about rallying the troops. It can also be about confirming a past argument that you might have felt you've lost and addressing that. It can be about bringing up particular values or feelings about something that is adjacent to the conversation on the table. But I do think the most important thing to be aware of in this one is using the vague terms and structuring like this makes it look like you have access to a whole bunch of true information that's uncontroversial. And ironically, an argument that appears uncontroversial is a very good winning argument because it looks like truth.
Hey, Joe, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, a few things. So I always find it interesting when this whole thing to me smells like we're asking for our government's opinion on what they think of a coup, which I just don't think there's ever going to be a government that's going to spawn. Yeah, that coup actually was a great idea. Too bad it failed. So it seems sort of strange that that's the onus that we're looking for, as opposed to trying to figure it out ourselves. Which, to be fair, there's no good way to do that, as far as I know, except another coup. I mean, another thing aside is that I kind of read it the same way that Tim did at first, where I at first thought the whole thing was about the Republicans, and then that like the also in that final sentence is what made me like, oh, okay, it probably is about the Democrats. But that confuses me because the Democrats did sort of try to do stuff, like they tried to get the special committee to investigate the January 6th insurrection, and so I'm not really sure. Like they kind of tried. I mean, granted, in their typical Democratic, not altogether useful way, where they didn't actually do anything, but they at least performed the stage theater.
For context, this is from May 24th. This tweet, right?
Okay.
And it was right, kind of after the bipartisan effort had failed, but before the announcement of a partisan committee.
Okay, that helps. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, not too much else to say. It seemed like a lot of the complaints were around, well, I guess there was a ton of complaints, but the one that you had shared about the narcissist, about the a narcissist doesn't go away until they've won. That's what I found interesting about really the Trump years in general, was a constant barrage of one tactic after another, where everyone thought, well, obviously this is going to be the thing that takes Trump down. And I thought one of the interesting examples of that was when Bob Woodward came out and released the audio of an interview with Trump in the early days of the pandemic, where he sort of had made it clear that he actually did see the danger of it. And then, 2 or 3 days later, there's clips of him in front of the media talking about how safe it is, and people jumped on Bob Woodward as though oh, if it's your fault that we're in this mess. If you had published that as soon as that came out, then everybody would have immediately been on board and gone against Trump, and everything would be totally different now. And that seemed to be their argument the entire time, and it's just, this is a continuation of that, I think. Throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Awesome. So let's kind of dive into responses. Tim, you already kind of touched on a response. Do you want to discuss that one further, or is there another response?
Is this the defeating the argument type response, a serious one, or snark, or funny responses?
This is free form, so whatever response you'd want to do, but the funny ones would come later.
The kind of responses that I would give, the one you're highlighting right there is sort of along the lines of where I would attack it if I wanted to defeat her argument, which is I find two serious weaknesses in her argument here. One is the assumption that it was a coup, right? I think that's a bridge too far to take as an assumption, right? It invites so much that alone you could do and undermine the whole rest of her argument. The other part is essentially her argument is based on the assumption that the only reason to oppose an investigation is that you want a coup to succeed, right? And politics is a messy business. And the first thing I would say to respond to that point is just to point out the political climate that was going on. which is that the Republicans clearly see that any investigation would lead to them being associated with whatever comes out of it. It would not look good for them anyway. So even if they don't want a coup to succeed, they would want to maintain their political position, which means they'd want to win elections. And so an investigation would probably be damaging to their election efforts. And that is not a coup, that's democratic, that's politics. So that, I would just respond with an alternative viewpoint of a reason that I think the Republicans, or in the Democrats, in the case of the Democrats, that final phrase, understanding it's about the Democrats, I would say, I would attack then the motive they might possibly have, which is, why would the party in power want a coup to succeed? At least open up that conversation, right?
Yep, awesome. Steve, is there a response you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, we're talking about the responses in the tweets, the tweet responses.
Yeah, or
Okay,
any response to this comment.
Yeah, so this one by, I don't know if you have it there, but the Simulux, I feel like the U is in the wrong place in poor Simulux's username, but that's a different show. And Susan Kramer, I like these two responses because these indicate some kind of the classical ways of like finding a way in. Like if you want to respond to something, what can you do? And oftentimes we feel like we have to respond directly to what we feel is not true, but we have options on how to do that. And these two tweets are talking about what we call the stasis of definition, which is, was this a coup or not? Now, there are three other responses you could make. You can say, well, there's nothing to see here. Nothing happened. That's the stasis of existence. And then there's definition, which is, no, you don't have it right. This isn't the way to understand what happened. Then you can say, well, it wasn't that bad, stasis of degree. Or you can say, well, this is the wrong response to it, stasis of policy. So those are like the classical world methods of thinking about this. So these two tweets are really interesting because they're taking up stasis of definition and saying, was this a coup or not? And they're arguing about that. And that's something that I guess you could get caught up in and really go. And I think Tim's right. The people who are turned off by that aren't going to engage anyway. They're going to say, well, that's extremist leftist politics to call it that. That's not really close to center. That's like the left wing is calling it a coup and still kind of calling it a coup. And the right wing is maybe calling it insurrection or something like that. But the better place to respond, I think, is not to fight about whether it's a coup or not, but whether or not an investigation is an appropriate response. I'd go to the stasis of policy myself, and I'd push back on her argument and be like, an investigation by people you're already implicating as corrupt is not going to fix anything. Like they're just going to be a fake thing, right? So I think that's kind of funny that response was kind of missed. Everybody thinks a legal investigation is going to save them, conducted by the exact same people who are both interested in a quote unquote coup. So it's funny that stasis doesn't come up, but I think a lot of people just don't realize that anytime anyone's making argument, you have options. You have a lot more than four. That's the classical world. In modern argumentation theory, you have a lot more. But those are the four big ones is, did something happen? How do we understand it? What's its level of intensity? And what do we do about it? Are four questions. You can take any one of those and run and find a good way to respond. But I thought these two were pretty funny as far as like what they think a coup is. And, the bottom line is it's a physically violent attack is a coup. But then the first person says it wasn't a coup because nobody in the crowd fired a bullet. So it has to involve guns and it has to be violent. This is a weird coup definition, people.
Awesome. Adriel, did I already ask you if you had a response you wanted to talk about? I lost track.
I don't think the second time around. This one's interesting. I think with almost all of the tweets that we'll actually cover, which I may have said this last time, where like I think they achieved their goal, where if the end goal was to sort of stoke conversation and to get their name out there, I think there's 27,000 likes and a bunch of comments and stuff. So that obviously worked. I mean, and she's already an author and podcast, stuff like that. But I think that it definitely didn't hurt. I I do find that the way it was phrased, and I think Steve's right, like it was, kind of expertly crafted, where she never said January 6th. She didn't technically say a coup did happen. Like there's a bunch of ways to weasel out of any sort of actual claim being made here, despite the fact that now people want to fight back. But like, it's one of those things where if you fight back at most, it just goes into the ether, and it's like, oh well, that's not how I meant that. Don't worry about it. But to me, the whole thing is an extension of sort of the attack on expertise, or the lack of trust in experts around, in this case, the election, where they saw an area where people don't trust, the news, and in this case, sort of the government and the sketchy stuff around elections, and they attacked that part, and it's been working, right? That people don't have trust in that, it seems like, and now it does come down to, well, if the vote was actually fraudulent, then is it a coup? Because if you didn't legitimately lose, then is trying to take back power a coup, which is, I that's the direction that the right are probably coming at it from, which is why they don't classify it as a coup. And that's where it all comes down to. Until you've established that part of it, the left is going to see it as a coup because they believe that they legitimately won it, and the right are trying to, overthrow it to prevent, them losing the election from taking effect. And the right believe that they didn't actually lose the election, which in this case, yeah, I guess goes back to my earlier statement of, if you didn't actually lose and you try to take back power, is that a coup?
Yeah, so if we wanted to rephrase this into what we call an omni-win argument, an argument where everyone benefits in some way, learns something, can respond, people aren't isolated from it. So pick a target that is like everyone. Is there a better way to phrase this? Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I have some ideas. I can go.
Yeah.
So I think the way I would phrase it, I don't think she's interested in changing minds. I think she's interested in feeding the people who already agree with her with better. I mean, it's like the Bill O'Reilly effect, feeding them with better kind of phrasing.
Mhm.
So they come to her like they would come to Bill O'Reilly as a rhetorical resource to say, what are my talking points, right? But if you did want to phrase it in a way that would maybe change people's minds, I came up with this idea of maybe doing something more like an enthymeme rather than a formal syllogism, which opens you up to a lot more criticism, and you don't get to hide behind deductive claims as if they're true. So I came up with something like, if the January 6th attack was a coup attempt by the Republicans, why aren't the Democrats investigating it and prosecuting the participants? That's what I would have put. But you see, that's a lot more open. That's like a question. It's an enthymeme. It hints at a conclusion. But I'm also taking on the risk that making a claim comes with it. I'm not trying to avoid the risk of making the argumentative claim. I want to, take on that risk factor. A lot of people don't want to do that for whatever weird reason. Instead of getting a good result, they're interested in the truth, which is kind of silly. We want a good result. And then maybe we can determine if we wanted to, whether it's true or not. But stuff like this, who knows what's true, right?
I think finding an what do you call it? The
omni-win.
Omni-win is impossible here. I think that was a good rephrasing for one possible perspective on the argument that's being made here. But I'll kind of reveal some of the background now. I did a lot of investigation behind this tweet and what was going on. First of all, what she's doing here is also promoting her podcast. Right? That's what the thread is that's going down, and the final part of this thread is it's a link to the latest episode of her podcast. So, part of a win for her is getting people to listen to the podcast. And I think stating something in a plainer, more educational format would not succeed at that goal. More interestingly, I did listen to the podcast. That phrase, those three phrases are actually part of the beginning of the podcast. She reads that into the podcast itself to go out into a longer discussion. And here's the part that most surprised me is, and it's a podcast with two hosts. I don't think it was actually her that made this final point or brought it home, which is there actually is, surprisingly to me at least, a belief that the Democrats are complicit in this to some degree. How is that so? That's an incredibly surprising accusation without any obvious warrant. Why would the Democrats want this to get themselves out of, a coup to take themselves out of power? And I think an underlying long-term thesis to this podcast is that what's going on is a multilateral effort to break up the United States. To as they themselves put it, break it up and sell it off piecemeal. And one of the phrases actually used in the podcast was, essentially, why do the Democrats want this? Kind of, I don't know, but there's the Silicon Valley techno billionaires involved, and probably what they want is California, which is very surprising conclusion. And I only interpret that as meaning the Democrats want to help breaking up the U.S. And they get to keep California, which is a very valuable property once that happens. I don't know if that's a whole thesis, but there is that completely missing support for why the Democrats would want a coup on themselves. And I don't know how you rephrase what was said there without, while pleasing everyone, shall I say?
Well, okay, yeah. So let me go into more detail. It's not pleasing everyone. That's not a goal. Her promoting her podcast is not OmniWin. That's only about a small select group of people. But the question is, can you have a conversation where people either change their mind and go more towards truth, or learn a little more about something where it doesn't, I don't know, where everyone can get some sort of value out of it and people aren't turned off, and you're not making a divisive climate. So if she has a point of promoting her podcast, that's true, and that's probably what this tweet was, but we're ignoring that. And we're saying, if you want to make these points, if you wanted to make this point, how could you make this point in a way that it's not driving people apart and aggravating people and contributing to our kind of divisive context?
Yeah, and so I think Steve's approach was a good one. And it kind of reaches to what is maybe the actual point here, which I didn't get from reading this. So I consider that the tweet is also kind of a failure in that aspect of me seeing what is the real question behind what's going on, is to highlight the apparent complicity of the Democrats in not investigating, right?
Yeah.
And you could definitely have a reasonable discussion around that point.
Yeah, and I know several people that kind of missed that. So that's interesting. That, I mean, the tweet didn't seem to fail because it did have 9.6 thousand shares. So, but yeah, so it depends on which. I mean, I think she's making several points in here. So I think you'd really need to choose one. And if you want to talk about, whether or not the Republicans wanted it, and then whether or not the Democrats are wants it to succeed eventually. Yeah, you'd want to say it different ways, and a way of everyone winning is, this is kind of a warning, and you want everyone to kind of take it seriously that something could be happening, and that this is potentially a test case for that. So yeah, I haven't thought through a great way to say it. I liked what Steve said. So stating them in the forms where she's saying of making kind of a rule to go by, or a way of stating it, I think was powerful, but doesn't open up the conversation. And using the word coup, Yeah, it's interesting because one thing we didn't mention is that from the Republican side, I don't think the Republicans are saying it's not a coup um, because there was or wasn't violence. The point was, in their case, it was like, these are some weirdos that did something, and it was probably Antifa anyways. So even if it was a bunch of people doing, it wasn't a coup because it wasn't a political party deciding to do this. It wasn't
would
a group,
almost
it
say
wasn't a
this is
cohesive group. It was a band of weirdos.
right.
That would be one
I
of the
think
strongest arguments against it, I think.
this is a huge, actually, missed opportunity from the perspective of sort of omni-win or advancing the discussion. Because first of all, not only me, but I had to go through 80% of the responses before I got one that understood it was talking about the Democrats, right? So obviously, the people on the right not only were turned off by the word coup, but most people were entirely missing the point that the Democrats are complicit. Now, she has an opportunity there of getting people on the right on her side if she starts going after the Democrats and their hidden motives, right? I think her tweet totally failed on an opportunity to get people on the right to start pressuring the Democrats or asking questions. If that's really her belief and her intention, she starts off by alienating most people, right? And then all the responses are responding to something that is irrelevant to her. Because it doesn't matter if it was a coup. It doesn't matter what it was. The question is, why don't the Democrats want to investigate? It doesn't have to be a coup. And so I think she failed in that goal by alienating people.
Adriel, do you want to add anything before we go to announcements?
I think it was mostly covered. I mean, I liked Steve's sort of way to reframe the question to make it a bit more specific and sort of answerable. But I think, as other people have sort of hinted at, that wasn't really her goal. Her goal wasn't actually to engage no, it was her podcast. It was to get attention. It was to get the retweets. And so she succeeded. I also agree with you, Bentley, that like ideally we'd want these sort of conversations to be a chance, to sort of say, well, I believe this and here's my evidence, and to actually learn from each other. I just don't think that would ever happen in the current climate, because the words that you use, people look at your history and who you work for. They try to figure out what camp you're a part of to figure out if they should trust a word that comes out of your mouth. And then as soon as they're like, oh, they got a left-leaning podcast, no, I'm not going to trust anything that this person says. I think it's kind of moot right now to try and actually engage, especially through Twitter. It's just not a great platform for this.
Yeah, it's funny to try to think of what a good platform would be. I mean, I think we're in a position in our world. And also, I mean, Kinzador, I don't think she's that cynical. I think she really does believe she's got the truth, like with her whole heart. She's really on to the truth of things, and she might not be a cynical business person. I don't know how cynical I want to read what she's trying to do there. But I would say that the problem here is when people think they have the truth, they're not interested in arguing. They're interested in beating you over the head with it. Argument requires risk, and argument is meant to encourage understanding. And somebody who thinks they've got the truth and they've got it right isn't interested in understanding. They're interested in acquiescence. And that's what we have going on in this tweet, I'd say.
Very true.
Great. Well, we're a little long on time, so I might actually edit in closing statement, the bumper at the end separately. Does anyone want to stay on and do any promotions, or I don't know how everyone is on time, so if anyone's short?
I have to get going.
Yeah,
I have
Thanks,
something
Adrian.
to promote.
We'll let Adriel go and then we could record that.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.
Adriel.
Yeah, see you later.
Yeah. The one thing I did want to respond to Steve, though, is, and this is kind of a promotion thing, you can't imagine a platform that is appropriate for advancing debate. I would propose the canonical debate. When it's finally built, that is what we're trying to do. Create something that focuses on substance rather than on beating people over the head and that sort of thing. But that's for another time.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah.
Tell us what would you like to share with the audience?
Well, I wanted to share, I don't have a link to it per se, but I just want to share that I've done a course, a short course on argumentation that's on academia.edu/courses. So if you go to academia.edu/courses and search for my name, LLANO, or search for argument, you'll see the course there and get a little preview of it. And then you can buy it if you want to buy it. And it's about an hour and a half on making meaningful arguments. And I just wanted to promote that because it just went live a few days ago.
Awesome. Look forward to that. Cool, man.
Great. Thanks so much.
That in. Yeah, and then I think I'll post this in the thing, but I think we probably need to sit down and talk about how that went and if we want to make changes and stuff.
Sure. I kind of like the bounciness of it. I don't know what other word to use, but I like
That's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
I like that kind of
seems
bounce.
like alive and bouncing back and forth. It seems pretty good.
Yeah. Cool, man.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Time.
Yep.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.